Night fell heavy over the narrow alley where rain poured like endless tears. A stray cat crouched beneath a rusted dumpster, her fur matted and soaked, trembling with every thunderclap. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her frightened eyes that darted from shadow to shadow. The sound of tires screeched nearby, and a car door slammed with a sharp crack, making her flinch. Someone muttered angrily before hurling a half-empty bottle, shattering against the ground. The cat recoiled, pressing herself into the corner as the shards sparkled like cruel stars around her. Hunger gnawed deep inside, but fear chained her paws to the wet concrete. The city roared above, indifferent to her suffering. She let out a small broken meow, almost swallowed by the storm. In the distance, a faint glow flickered from a small house window, a fragile warmth piercing the bleak night. The cat's heart stirred faintly, though her body shivered with cold and despair, the world offering no kindness yet whispering a fragile promise of hope. The storm raged on as the stray searched for scraps along the alley wall, her paws splashing through shallow puddles. She sniffed at an old cardboard box, finding only the bitter scent of mold. A rat darted past, startling her back into the shadows. Hunger twisted her stomach, louder than the thunder above. She crept toward an overturned trash bin, pushing it gently, hoping for food. The lid clanged and echoed, making her leap backward in fear. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed through the wet night. She crouched low, her body trembling, her tail flicking nervously. Lightning revealed her frail shape, a ghost among the streets. With desperation gnawing at her, she pressed forward, too weak to stop searching. The city offered nothing but harshness, yet she kept moving, driven by the faintest spark of survival. The stray edged closer to a back door, where warm light spilled through a crack. Her nose twitched at the faint scent of food drifting out. But before she could inch nearer, a sudden shout echoed. Richard barked a curse and hurled a metal can in her direction. The clang against the wet ground rang sharp, sending her leaping into the shadows once more. Her heart pounded, ears pinned tight to her skull. Every breath came in ragged bursts as fear wrestled with hunger. The sound of boots thudded against the pavement before fading back into silence. She crouched, waiting, her eyes fixed on the door, torn between hope and terror. The light inside glowed steady, promising warmth, but her paws refused to move closer. She licked the raindrops from her whiskers, her small body trembling. The rain slowed to a drizzle, though the alley remained soaked and unforgiving. The stray slumped near a crumbling brick wall, her body curled tight against the cold. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the steady drip of water from the rooftop above. For a moment, silence ruled, broken only by her shallow breaths. The world felt impossibly large and merciless. She dreamed faintly of warmth, of gentle hands she barely remembered. Her tail twitched as if chasing memories long gone. Then thunder rumbled again, jolting her awake. She raised her head, ears twitching, eyes wide, only to meet the emptiness of the dark street. Loneliness pressed harder than the rain, settling into her bones. Far down the alley, a faint glow cut through the misty air. The stray lifted her head, her eyes narrowing on a small house window that flickered warm light. Her body ached, but the sight stirred a fragile hope within her. She rose slowly, her paws unsteady, and took a step forward before stopping. The glow looked unreal, like a mirage against the endless cold. She let out a hesitant meow, her voice weak, then lowered her head again. The storm clouds thinned above, letting moonlight spill faintly onto the wet street. For the first time that night, the darkness seemed less absolute. She stayed crouched, staring toward the glow, torn between fear of rejection and the pull of a promise she did not yet understand. The stray limped toward the edge of the alley where the rain eased into a soft drizzle. Her paws sank into wet earth as she reached the edge of a small garden beside a quiet house. She paused, her body trembling, ears twitching at every faint sound. The scent of damp soil and faint traces of food drifted toward her nose, pulling her forward. She pressed against the wooden fence, peeking through the slats with wide green eyes. Inside the yard, soft light glowed from the porch, casting long golden streaks across the grass. Her body ached, but the warmth of the place called to her with quiet promise. For a moment, her hunger overpowered her fear, and she meowed softly into the night air. No answer came, only the rustle of wind in the trees. She crouched lower, pressing her small frame against the fence, staring into a world that seemed safe but unreachable. The stray's eyes fixed on the figures moving inside the glowing house. Through the glass window, a family sat together, laughter faintly reaching into the night. She tilted her head, ears perked, her breath fogging the air as she leaned closer. A woman with kind eyes passed by the window, her silhouette framed by the gentle light. The cat's tail twitched with longing as her stomach growled in protest. Her gaze lingered on the warm room beyond the glass. Every flicker of firelight inside a painful reminder of what she lacked. She pressed her paws to the cold ground, fighting the instinct to run, yet unable to pull her eyes away. The night wrapped around her like a shadow, but that window remained a fragile beacon, whispering of safety she had never known. Hunger clawed at her belly as her eyes caught sight of a bowl left near the porch steps. The faint scent of leftover food reached her nose, and her body tensed with urgency. She crept closer, paws silent on the wet grass, every muscle straining with caution. Her gaze flicked nervously toward the house before fixing on the prize. A soft whimper slipped past her throat, more plea than sound. Her tongue brushed against her lips, trembling as she inched forward, yet her heart raced, warning her of unseen dangers. The yard was quiet but alive with possibility, every rustle of leaves sending fear up her spine. The food lay just steps away, glowing under the porch light as though meant for her, yet fear kept her pressed low against the earth. Suddenly, a sharp bark shattered the stillness. A large dog next door lunged against the fence, teeth bared, its growls echoing in the night. The stray froze, her body rigid, her ears pinned tight against her head. Panic shot through her as she stumbled backward into the shadows. The dog's claws scraped against wood, the sound sharp and threatening. Her heart thundered, her tail flicking in fear as she pressed flat against the wet earth. The food bowl gleamed only a few feet away, but terror chained her where she crouched. The bark grew louder, rattling the silence, making her eyes widen with dread. She turned her head toward the safety of the alley, torn between hunger and survival. The promise of food faded under the weight of fear. Inside the house, Emily paused, her eyes narrowing as she noticed movement outside the window. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass, scanning the darkness of the yard. A faint shape moved near the fence, its outline small and trembling. Her heart stirred, sensing something fragile and lost. She whispered softly, though no one else heard her, words meant only for herself. A flicker of recognition passed through her mind as she watched the little form crouched in the shadows. She pressed her hand gently against the glass, the warmth of the room meeting the cold night. Beyond the pane, the stray lifted her head, green eyes shimmering in the dim light, locking briefly with Emily's gaze. The silence between them carried more than words, a quiet moment where two lives brushed against each other's loneliness. Dawn crept along the roofs as the yard glistened with fading rain. The stray edged from the bushes, drawn by the memory of warmth. Emily stepped onto the porch and paused, careful not to startle the small visitor. Emily said, "Hey there, you're safe here." The cat froze, muscles taut, gaze flicking between the door and the grass. Emily crouched, setting a shallow dish near the step. Emily said, "It's okay, I'll stay back." The light wind carried the scent of food and wet clover. The cat took one step, then another, belly low to the ground. A floorboard creaked and she flinched hard. Her heart pounded a wild rhythm against the quiet morning. She retreated to the fence, torn by fear and need, while Emily kept still, a patient figure framed by soft light. Minutes passed as silence wrapped the porch. The cat inched closer, eyes fixed on the dish. Emily held her breath, steady and calm. Emily said, "You're brave, little one." The cat sniffed, then jolted as a distant trash lid slammed. She shot backward, claws skittering on wet boards. Emily stayed still, hands open, voice a hush. Emily said, "I won't hurt you." A bird startled from the fence, scattering drops like tiny pearls. The cat hovered at the yard's edge, tail twitching with doubt. Hunger tugged her forward again, but trust was a steep hill. The morning brightened, yet the space between them felt fragile as glass. The yard door creaked open next door, and heavy boots thudded. Richard stepped out, scowling at the sight of the cat near the porch. Richard said, "Keep that stray away from here." The words struck like a thrown stone. The cat flattened, eyes wide, ready to bolt. Emily rose slowly, a quiet barrier between anger and fear. Emily said, "She's not harming anyone." Richard snorted and kicked at a puddle, splashing the fence. The cat fled into the hedge, leaves rattling as she vanished. Emily's jaw set, resolve hardening despite the sting of the moment. The morning felt colder, as if the sun had stoled behind a cloud of doubt. Shaken and hungry, the cat slipped through a gap in the fence and crossed the alley. The street beyond hissed with wet tires and impatience. She paused at the curb, whiskers trembling at the heat of passing engines. A horn blared, slicing the air. She darted forward, paws splashing through a shallow stream of runoff. Headlights flared, white and merciless, and she froze mid-step. Car swerved, water exploding across the lane. She lunged to the median, heart hammering like thunder trapped in a cage. The city roared around her, vast and uncaring. She gathered herself, then sprinted for the far side, hope no more than a thin thread pulling her on. She reached the far sidewalk and stumbled, breath ragged, paws stinging. The world wavered as fatigue folded around her like wet cloth. She pushed on toward a familiar scent, the faint thread leading back to the quiet yard. The sky brightened, but her steps faltered, rhythm breaking into uncertain stutters. She slipped through the fence gap and collapsed near the gate. Emily hurried out, startled by the small heap of shivering life. Emily said, "I've got you." The words floated like a soft blanket. Emily placed a towel near the cat and knelt, careful and slow. Emily said, "Stay with me." The cat's eyes fluttered, catching the calm in Emily's face, and the fear inside her loosened by a breath. Morning light thinned the gray sky as the yard held its breath. The cat lay near the gate, sides rising in shallow waves, eyes dulled by a long night. Emily stepped closer, moving with measured care as if nearing a fragile shore. Emily said, "It's okay, I'm here." The words settled softly, warm as steam from a mug. She set a towel on the grass and lowered a small bowl of water. The cat sniffed, then retreated a whisker's width, torn between instinct and need. Emily kept her hands visible and still, the porch light fading in the cool day. Emily said, "Drink if you want." A robin chirped from the fence, and the world seemed less sharp. The cat stretched her neck, tongue touching the surface like a secret. Strength gathered by degrees, each sip a thread. Emily breathed with her, slow and steady, while a quiet promise formed in the space between them. Emily noticed a faint line pressed into the cat's neck fur, a pale groove where something once rested. She shifted closer, framing her body sideways to seem smaller. Emily said, "You wore a collar once." The cat blinked, as if the words brushed old dust from a shelf. Emily's gaze tracked the subtle mark, a stored history etched in skin. She lifted the towel corner and dabbed gently at the damp fur. Emily said, "Someone loved you before." The air carried the scent of wet earth and soap from a nearby window. Cat's ears twitched, but she did not flee. Time slowed into careful breaths and small adjustments. Emily's hand hovered, waiting for permission that could not be asked. The groove at the neck spoke louder than any sound, a quiet proof of belonging that had slipped away. Hope, fragile and stubborn, took root. A memory moved behind Emily's eyes like weather shifting over water. She sat on the step, leaving space between them that felt intentional. Emily said, "I lost a cat once." The words trembled, but held steady like a bridge. She looked at the fence, not the fear, and let the story breathe. Emily said, I never stopped looking for her. The cat watched, reading the air more than the voice. A breeze lifted the towel edge and set it down again, as if nodding. Emily said, I know what missing feels like. The yard brightened, a veil lifting from the grass. The cat inched closer, not enough to touch, enough to understand. Grief met hunger on the same road, and did not argue. Emily's hands stayed quiet, her presence doing the speaking. Something unclenched in the morning. Cat's gaze drifted inward, and the yard thinned to a whisper. A kitchen tile sun warmed. A hand that smelled of flour. A ribbon bell that chimed like rain. All rose like steam. The memory flickered, tender and bright, then cracked with a door left open too long. She remembered a street that hummed, a lurch of fear, a sound swallowed by engines. The ribbon bell became a silence at her throat. Hunger replaced ritual, and corners replaced laps. Yet warmth had once been a language she spoke without thinking. The present returned like breath after holding it underwater. Emily's presence matched an old outline the cat had tried to forget. The groove at the neck no longer felt like absence alone. It felt like a map. Clouds parted and sent a pale beam across the porch. Emily unfolded a small blanket, its edges neat, its color gentle as morning tea. Emily said, Let's get you warm. The blanket settled on the step like a harbor line. The cat rose on shaky legs and tested the fabric with a paw. She kneaded once, then twice, a ritual older than fear. Emily stayed very still, letting safety arrive by inches. Emily said, You can rest here. The yard filled with the quiet rhythm of breathing and small sounds. Somewhere a kettle clicked off, the day remembering its tasks. The cat curled on the blanket, tail to nose, eyes half closing as the world softened. Trust did not arrive with thunder. It arrived like light through thin curtains. The peace of morning cracked when Richard stormed into the yard, boots thudding against wet boards. His face carried anger, sharper than steel. Richard said that Stray doesn't belong here. The words cut through the gentle silence like a knife. The cat shrank against the porch, body pressed low, eyes wide with fear. Emily rose swiftly, stepping between them, her back straight, voice steady. Emily said, She stays. The yard seemed to still, the leaves barely daring to move. Richard's glare darkened, his hand twitching as though ready to push his weight forward. Cat's heart raced, claws scraping lightly on wood. Emily stood taller, her presence calm but unyielding, the air charged with defiance. The moment stretched, tense and heavy, the conflict standing in plain daylight. Richard stepped closer, his boots splashing against damp earth, voice sharp. Richard said, Call animal control, or I will. The cat flinched at the harsh tone, her body trembling as if the ground itself rejected her. Emily's jaw tightened, her hands clenched, but her voice calm. Emily said, No, she's staying with me. Her words rang like iron, unbending. Richard's glare flickered, a challenge unspoken. The cat's breath quickened, green eyes darting between them. The yard, once sanctuary, became a battlefield of wills. Emily planted her feet, unshaken, her presence a shield. Silence pressed in, thick and unyielding, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves. The air held the weight of choice, heavy with consequence. As the silence broke, the cat shifted forward, no longer cowering in full retreat. She rose, her back arched slightly, yet her eyes steady. Emily glanced down, startled by her bravery. Emily said, See, she's not afraid anymore. The cat stepped closer to Emily, tail curling near her leg. The gesture was small, but spoke louder than any defense. Richard scoffed, muttering under his breath, but something in his eyes faltered. The cat's trembling slowed, her breathing steadier, her courage flickering to life. Emily's hand hovered, near but not touching, waiting for the choice to belong to the cat. Richard turned his head, frustration twisting his features, but the moment belonged to trust rising in daylight. Dark clouds rolled in as the air thickened with storm. A crack of thunder startled the yard, and rain began to fall again. The cat turned suddenly, ears alert, eyes locking on faint movement near the fence. A tiny kitten stumbled out, drenched and trembling, its mule nearly lost in the storm. The stray bolted forward, shielding the small form beneath her soaked body. Emily gasped, rushing to the edge of the yard. Emily said, "There's another one." Richard froze, his anger stunned into silence as the scene unfolded. The stray crouched over the kitten, her body trembling yet unyielding, her green eyes fierce with protection. Lightning split the sky, but courage held steady against the storm. Emily dashed into the storm, scooping both the cat and kitten into her arms, cradling them close against her chest. Emily said, "You're safe now." The rain plastered her hair to her face, but her eyes burned with fierce resolve. Richard shouted faintly, but his voice drowned under thunder. Emily turned, shielding the animals as she ran toward the porch. The cat pressed against her, not resisting, the kitten's weak cry muffled in safety. The storm raged around them, yet within her arms, a fragile peace grew. Emily burst through the doorway, slamming it shut behind her. Emily said, "No one will take you from me." The house glowed warm against the storm, a sanctuary drawn in light. The storm eased to a quiet drizzle as warmth filled the house. The stray lay curled near the fireplace, steam rising from her damp coat as the flames crackled. The kitten nestled against her side, eyes closing in drowsy peace. Emily moved softly, laying extra wood on the fire, her movements gentle, deliberate. Emily said, "You're safe now." The house hummed with calm, every shadow softened by golden light. The cat stretched slightly, her body relaxing into the blanket Emily had spread earlier. Her eyes met Emily's for a fleeting second, not in fear but in fragile trust. The kitten's small purrs filled the silence, blending with the steady rhythm of the fire. For the first time, the house felt complete, stitched together by presence and quiet healing. Emily sank into a chair nearby, watching over them, her heart lightened. Emily gently placed a bowl of food near the hearth. The scent drifted across the room, and the stray lifted her head cautiously. Her green eyes flickered between fear and hunger, then softened as she stepped forward. She lowered her face and began to eat slowly, each bite a step away from fear's grip. Emily sat nearby, her hands folded in her lap, saying nothing, letting silence hold the moment steady. The kitten stirred, watching with tiny eyes before curling closer again. Emily said softly, "Take your time." The flames danced on the walls, casting long shadows that felt protective instead of ominous. For the first time, the cat's movements showed comfort, not only survival. The room shifted, becoming not just shelter but home. The kitten crawled toward Emily, its paws clumsy, fur still damp, but eyes curious. Emily extended her hand slowly, letting the tiny creature sniff her fingers. Emily whispered, "You're a brave little one." The kitten pressed closer, climbing onto her lap with hesitant steps. The stray raised her head, watching, eyes sharp but softening as trust deepened. Emily stroked the kitten lightly, her touch feather soft as though holding something sacred. The room filled with a tender hum, kitten's purr mingling with the fire's crackle. Emily's eyes shone, seeing not just fragility but resilience woven into the small body. The cat blinked slowly, a silent gesture of acceptance, her muscles easing further. The circle of trust widened, a quiet bond sealed by warmth and gentle patience. Emily leaned back against the chair, her gaze heavy with reflection. Her hand lingered on the kitten's back, the small heartbeat grounding her. Emily whispered, "You've healed something in me too." Memories of her lost cat stirred, pain tempered now by the fragile family before her. The stray shifted, stretching her paws, then rested her head on the blanket, green eyes half closed. Emily's voice trembled, but the words carried peace. Emily said, "Maybe we were meant to find each other." The fire crackled, sending sparks into the chimney, the night holding steady around them. Outside, the storm had cleared, stars scattered across the dark sky. Inside, silence felt like a gift, not emptiness. The room breathed with life again. The stray's body relaxed fully as Emily reached out, hand hovering just above her fur. For a heartbeat, the cat hesitated, then leaned into the touch, eyes closing. Emily's breath caught, a tear slipping free, though her smile glowed. Emily whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." The kitten stirred, pressing closer against both of them, weaving the moment whole. The fire dimmed into embers, their glow steady, a quiet heartbeat for the house. Trust had not come through force, but through patience and kindness. Emily felt the weight of her grief lighten, replaced with fragile hope stitched into every purr and every small gesture of belonging. In that quiet, she understood that healing had been mutual. The night outside was dark, but inside, the light was enough. Morning sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, turning the house into a canvas of gold. The stray stretched lazily near the window, her fur glowing in the light, while the kitten batted at shadows on the rug. Emily opened the curtains wider, smiling softly. Emily said, "Good morning, little family." The house, once heavy with silence, now hummed with quiet joy. The cat yawned, curling back into her blanket, content in the rhythm of safety. Outside, the trees swayed gently, carrying away the echoes of storms past. Peace no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. The window creaked open, and fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet earth and blossoms. The cat perched gracefully on the sill, tail flicking in rhythm with the breeze. Her green eyes scanned the yard, no longer searching for escape but watching over what was hers. Emily stood nearby, her gaze soft, the quiet pride of seeing trust take root. The kitten leapt clumsily, pawing at the curtain hem, its tiny mew filling the room with laughter's echo. The morning felt like a promise fulfilled, a life mended thread by thread. On the rug, the kitten rolled onto its back, batting the air with clumsy paws. Emily knelt beside it, her laughter soft but genuine. The stray watched from her perch, eyes half closed in calm approval. Emily said, "You belong here." The words floated into the quiet, more truth than comfort. The kitten tumbled and climbed onto Emily's lap, purring like a small engine. Emily's fingers brushed its fur while her gaze drifted toward the older cat. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. A bond made of shared survival and fragile hope turned strong. Emily's hand pressed gently to the window frame as she whispered, "You're home now." The words carried across the quiet, settling like a vow. The cat shifted from the sill, leaping gracefully to the floor, landing without fear. She brushed against Emily's leg, the contact deliberate, her purr rising steady. Emily bent, stroking the fur with reverence, while the kitten bounded toward them, tail high. The three formed a small circle of warmth against the stillness of the house. The past had scars, but the present glowed. Every heartbeat in the room spoke of belonging. The day settled into stillness as the family curled together on the couch. The kitten nestled between Emily's arms, while the cat rested by her side, her eyes closing in full peace. Emily leaned back, her heart full, her face softened with quiet awe. The fire crackled faintly, though the air outside was warm, a rhythm of comfort. Emily whispered, "We made it." The words held no sorrow now, only triumph stitched with love. The house glowed against the fading light of day, every shadow chased by presence. Their story ended not in silence but in the music of trust, purrs echoing like a promise never to be broken again.